We have Christina Bracken, who's here for a PSA about voting. Just use her if you have any doubts, please.
I do want to offer, though, is answering any questions that you might have about whether you are election ready. And what I mean by that is, A, are you registered? Do you know for sure that you're registered? Do you know how to look it up? If you don't, I can come around and help you look that up. The second question is, do you have a vote by mail application that is valid and current? If you have received your vote by mail ballot already, then you have one. If you have not received it, you will most likely not have one on record with the election department.
Yes.
The reason why you might not have received it yet is because in 2022, the governor canceled all vote by mail applications, and everyone has to reapply to vote by mail. So if you haven't received something that looks like this, you probably don't have a standing vote by mail application, and I can help you to apply for that. So the question is, if I have a voter ID card and my driver's license, do I get in? And with that, I'm assuming that you mean into the polling location to vote. The answer is absolutely yes. So let's recap a few things. The elections that are coming up, right? Our election day is when? November 5th, exactly. So that's the big V-Day. Tuesday, November 5th. Early voting starts on October 21st. We have 2 weeks of early voting every day, Monday through Friday and the weekend from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And where can we do that?
There's 33 locations. The closest one is the historic garage, which is right opposite Vizcaya. Used to be the Science Museum. You probably all have been there. That is the closest early voting location. So starting on the 21st, all of you could vote early in person. If you feel more comfortable or you have mobility issues and you want to vote by mail with what's in this envelope, then we can apply for a vote by mail ballot in the next couple of days. There's plenty of time still to get it.
And how do you do that? Because I tried to do the absentee voting before and they said I could do it online. I tried to do it online and I got a response saying that's no longer valid.
Okay, so the question is, how can I apply for a vote by mail ballot? So there's two main ways. You can use a paper form, or actually three. You can use a paper form, you can do it online, and you can call the elections department to ask them to put you on that list.
They're going to be here
I did it online and I
in the community center. I can get you that date. The elections department will be here to deal exactly with that.
Thank you.
Right? Thank you. Let me get you that date.
Yeah. So they'll find the date when the elections department will be here.
Let's get you that date.
I'll be happy to go around and check with you whether you have an application that's valid, and then how to maybe apply for it. It's very easy to do, and we have both. We can do both on paper or online. So one of your colleagues recommends that when you vote by mail, that you take it to the post office and submit it to them so it doesn't get lost. Yeah, that's always a good idea with important paperwork. The other important thing is when you do vote by mail, you fill out your ballot, you put it into the envelope, you need to sign and date the outside of the envelope. Very important, okay? And add your return address and maybe a phone number in case they have questions. That's also very helpful. All right, so back to the dates one more time. November 5th, Tuesday is election day. Early voting starts on October 21st. You can still register to vote or update your voter registration until the 7th of October. So we still have a few days to do that. That's why we're here today. You can also apply for vote by mail until October 24th. But I recommend not to wait that long because it gets a little tight then. Anyway, so if you have questions, please call me. I will come to your table and I'll help you individually to make sure that you have and know what your status is.
Thank you very much for coming out today and enjoying your bingo and the way that you interact with everyone here. So this is great as part of being a great community. And part of being a great community is having leaders that represent us at the county, state, federal level. And today we're very lucky to have one of those, and that's our good friend Commissioner Raquel Regalado. Raquel has been very active working on all of our issues here on the Key, and she's here to communicate that with you and to listen to you and find out what's going on in your neighborhood. Well, without further ado, let me introduce Raquel Regalado.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I always tell Joe that I wish I could say he was my favorite mayor, but my father would be upset, and so would be Mike. So we won't have competitions, but you're amazing, Joe, and I really appreciate your partnership. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Raquel Regalado. I've been your county commissioner for 4 years, and before that I was your school board member, and I did the expansion of Mass Academy, and I love Key Biscayne. I grew up in the roads, and we always joke that whenever my team goes through my childhood pictures, they wonder why every single one of them is in Crandon. And I mentioned that if you grew up in the roads, Key Biscayne was your backyard, right? So I've seen it change so much, and one of the things that we try to do is try to maintain the community feel that really makes this a village. So I know that for many years the relationship between the city, the village, and the county was antagonistic, and I apologize for that, as it was with the school board. But one of the things that I promised and I think that I have delivered on is changing that. We are your partners, and we're here for whatever you need. I think if there's anything that we've proven over the last 4 years with all my cities is that we can have a partnership, and that the county is not here to do any damage. We all serve the same residents and we all want the same things. We want to help with your quality of life. And me in particularly, I happen to be obsessed with infrastructure. As we often joke, my father's last name gives me the ability to talk about the things that most politicians don't want to talk about, shit and trash. You know, most politicians don't want to talk about those things. I'm like all in, right? I'm all in. Talking about infrastructure and stormwater and resilience and seawalls and a lot of these super wonky, non-Instagrammable things that are important. But when I first got elected, the number one thing here as a school board member was obviously the lack of a high school. And I remember knocking on doors and they were like, oh, the school board will never give us a high school. We've been asking for 38 years. And now we have Mass Academy. So when I became a commissioner, there were some complaints about, you know, the access, and I tried to work for the school board for a bit, and then finally my team just fixed the intersection, and Joe was wonderful with that. We were able to get it done, and we've really been tackling all of the late projects that the county had. So the county had on the books so many things, you know, for Key Biscayne, starting with the library. And obviously we had a litigation. When they first told me that, I thought it was a joke. I was like, who would sue over a library? But yes, there were real issues that we worked through. And now we're very excited because we had a series of meetings. And I know that at first, when I said a 2-story library, everybody was a little taken back by it because you have such a small library. But like I said to everyone, it's really about providing space for programming. Libraries have changed. They're no longer about books. We actually mail the books. So if you want books, you know, we can mail them to you and you can drop them off. But it's really about programming and community space. And I need the space in order to do more programming, right? So in my district, I have a lot of historic libraries like the Coral Gables Library that we just redid. And it's a lovely little library, but I really can't do much programming. I have one tiny room where I fit 50 people, and then I'm out of gas. So I really wanted to do more in Key Biscayne, especially since this community center gets so much use. so much use, right? So I know from working with It Takes a Village and obviously for our programming, I mean, that literally had to fight for space in this place. So I really wanted the library to be an extension of that. And for those of you who saw the meetings and the renderings, it's going to be an extension of that. It's going to be a beautiful space. We're keeping the landscaping and the ponds and all the historical aspect of it. But really, from a historical perspective, it was just like a sales center, right? So we're not really losing much in that sense. So we're going to be demolishing it soon. We do have a temporary space. I did get the board to approve the funding for that. So similar to Cory Gables, we're going to have a temporary library space, which has been difficult to find because, as you know, retail is really hard. Retail space is really hard to find here in the Key, but we're almost done, and Ray really has been wonderful. And then once we have that, we'll move with the demo, and we'll start the construction. The construction is going to take about 1 year and 4 months is what we're looking at, right? And now we're trying to accommodate.
Can you tell them where the temporary might be?
We're not sure yet. We have 2 spaces. I approved, what we approved is, we approved the money, because what was happening is he was finding a space, and then by the time he got it to the board, he was losing the space. So I just had to tell my board, like, you're just gonna have to trust Ray, right? Like, we're just gonna give him the money, and he's gonna go find a space, and we're gonna trust him, because we lost like 3 spaces. So we should have that back in about 1.5 months. So I'll let you know, and we'll be posting about it and the opening date and everything and the information on the demo. So we're really excited about the library. We were also able to make some, changes that were long overdue at Crandon, right? So everything from potholes, to the bike paths. There were so many things that were delayed on Crandon, and we were able to move that forward. And then the Crandon board had not met for, I don't know, what is it, 6 or 7 years? Yeah. 6 or 7 years. And I spent the first 2 years asking for the board to meet. And in year 2, they told me that the reason they couldn't meet is because they didn't have quorum. So then I asked the mayor to name me and Mike Davey, which was what happened. And we actually had our first meeting. And one of the reasons that we really needed to have that meeting was to present 2 items that the village had passed. That have to do with access. And then also, I'm a little obsessed with pickleball. I'm not gonna lie. I love the pickleball. I get a lot. My colleagues are coming around to the pickleball. So at first, I was the first pickleball adopter. And we did some great events at Calusa, but Calusa is very small, right? And I did try with the Junior Orange Bowl to revamp the old tennis center. But we had some issues with the committee and Matheson, but we were able to approve and start the restoration of the outdoor courts, because that's not in the agreement. So that is actually happening. We're redoing all the bathrooms, and we actually also released the money to fix the golf course. There is more coming on the golf course because there is a group that wants to do an expansion of the golf course, which is fine. I just said, listen, I'm going to fix what I got to fix, right? And if a group wants to come in and do more, phenomenal. But we really had a lot of maintenance issues that we hadn't gotten to on Crandon specifically that I've just been fast tracking. For those of you who have seen the Rickenbacker, obviously we finally took down the Australian pines and opened the other side of Hobie. OMG, it's been closed since like 1993. It was embarrassing. For those of you who wondered why I put a mulcher out there, it's because I knew that I was going to be accused of a tree massacre, even though they're invasive. I was accused of a tree massacre, even though I had the mulcher out there. We try to do what we can, but they're invasive, and we did mulch them. And we really needed to do the work. There was a rumor that I was going to put concessions. No concessions on that side. There's no concessions on that side. There's no space for concessions on that side, right? That side, if you follow me at zoning, I don't like palm trees. My dad jokes that I'm the only Cuban that doesn't like palm trees. They're not trees, they're herbs, and they provide no water mitigation, which is why I do not like them. But I had to put them on the other side of Hobie because there's no room for anything else, right? So it's a very tight area, and we wanted to have something, but I didn't want to put in plants that would have roots that would then tear up the pavers, which is what we know happens at Crandon with the bike path and the pavers. So, lesson learned. We try to make different mistakes, not the same mistakes, right? Acquiesce to the palm trees. They don't do that kind of damage. But that area is almost done, and it's going to be lovely and just provide folks another opportunity, to be there. And you don't need to see that ugly fence, and all of that closed off, which was really unsightly, right? As you came into the key. I will get ahead of myself because everyone always asks me about this aquarium. So I have a love-hate relationship with this aquarium. I was born and raised here. And I went to this aquarium. I saw Lolita for the first time when I was 3, and I was awestruck. I would tell you that it was my first childhood memory. It's actually my second. My first one was at the Orange Bowl at a Dolphins game. Another story for another day. But it was hard to deal with this aquarium because a lot of us, it's a multi-generational place, My parents took me there. I took my kids there. They went to the camp there. But we all know that they hadn't cleaned it since 1950. So, there's issues with the infrastructure there. And when Wometco sold, we really were excited about somebody coming in and investing in the infrastructure. And sadly, that just didn't happen. So, I've been working with the mayor, and obviously we've taken them to court. We had a motion to dismiss that was denied this week because they were late on paying their rent. But the judge said that they were going to be given an opportunity. So now we move on to mediation. But I will tell you this. I've done a lot of research on the limitations of the property. I know that there's a lot of concerns about that. Number one, there was a lawsuit with the village many, many years ago when the county considered putting a water park. And the result of that lawsuit is there cannot be a water park. Okay? So we'll take that off the table. Number two, it is considered a park. So because it is a park, it is protected by a county ordinance that is called Amendment 7. And that means that it can only be a park, right? So it cannot have residential, it cannot be given to a developer. It has a series of deed restrictions and county restrictions. And because it is waterfront, it would also have to go to referendum. So there's a lot of different hurdles, that have to be, jumped through in order to change the use of that property. There are differing opinions at the county as to what it should be. Personally, I hope it remains some sort of marine mammal park, personally, just because we don't have one, right? And I feel but it's and I'll explain this. It's similar to the circus, right? So when I was a kid, you went to the circus, and you saw elephants and you saw all these things. And then when I took my kids, they weren't there anymore. They had dogs and goats, and people up in the air. But it was still the circus, right? So I'm not saying that it needs to be the type of marine mammal park that it is now, right? But that doesn't mean it can't be some iteration of a marine mammal park because it's such an iconic place. And I've tried to explain this to the administration and to other folks. Look, when you're from New York or when you're from somewhere else, you get to take your kids back to those places that you visited as a child, I grew up going to the zoo at Crandon, gone. I often visit the little train tracks because that's all that's left. But the aquarium is one of the few spaces, right? And some version of it, the county tore down the planetarium. I was against that too. And there's really not a lot of places, right? Everything has changed here. So there is a nostalgia associated with that space that I think is fair. But it is also a beautiful space. So there's a lot of different folks that are interested in doing a lot of different things. The litigation is not an easy one, but we'll see what happens, and obviously we'll keep you abreast of all of that, because I know that there's a lot of concern. Meanwhile, we have moved forward, and the mayor and his team has been wonderful. We've been meeting with the city of Miami on the Marine Stadium. For those of you who do not know, the Marine Stadium is like my father's fourth child. So he asked me about the Marine Stadium every other Sunday. If you know your Miami history, Manny Diaz wanted to tear it down, and my dad had to declare it historic. The first and only time I saw him get angry on the dais was over the Marine Stadium. I worked with Hilario Candela, and we've really tried for years to get the city to invest. We're currently working on an RFP And you'll remember when the city tried to put the little houses, I kind of lost my mind a little bit, and we shut it down quickly. That area does not have a lot of infrastructure, right? So it doesn't have water and sewer infrastructure. It doesn't have Wi-Fi infrastructure. Those are other things that are problematic. But one of the things that we've all discussed is that it would be better if it had one operator. Because currently what we have with the city is like one event comes in, another event comes in, this permit here, that permit here. And then Joe and I are playing like whack-a-mole, trying to figure out kind of what's going on at the stadium. And we would want to just have one person that could just call us and tell us so that we can all plan. So we actually brought our best traffic person from the county, Officer Rita Rodriguez. She's amazing. And she has been working with the village and with the city of Miami on a memorandum of transit that is going to be incorporated in that RFP. So whoever kind of takes this on will have that as a baseline. Because what we don't want is every time there's an event, we have to go 10 rounds of how many police officers, what's the detour, where are you going to put the cars. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So at least this way, there's a floor. And listen, if they want to do more, phenomenal. But they can't do less, you know, and there'll be notice requirements, and we're working on that. And speaking of traffic, we're also working with FDOT. We've asked them to allow us to put a sign right outside the Rickenbacker that lets people know when Bill Bags is closed. Yay! We're so excited! Exactly, because like the angry people on the key, like it's just unnecessary, right? And for those of you who've been following it, I supported Mickey Steinberg when the governor was thinking about doing different things with our parks. He went after Olita, and I supported her on the board. The board took a unanimous position. I co-sponsored her item. You know, hands off our parks. Because Olita's amazing, but Bill Bags would be next. So that's why I think, you know, we need to just shut that conversation down completely. I would love to see a greater investment in Bill Bags, but not that type of commercialization. We don't need that. So we are working with the Lighthouse. Obviously, they have a big anniversary, you know, coming up. And we have been bringing Bill Bags into the conversation with the county and the county's Parks Department. They had a disconnect for a long time. So we're excited about that. And then obviously, you know, we have tried our best to do programming and to help out with anything that we can help out with. I'll end with the bridges. That's the big lift here, right? So, you know, the William Powell, you know, Bear Cut, that's the big lift. So now that we've kind of taken care of a lot of the maintenance issues and a lot of like the day-to-day stuff, the e-bikes, all these different things that kind of have popped up on us, you know, now we need to deal with the bridges. And we're looking at different solutions, obviously, working with the city because their use of Virginia Key and their use of the Marine Stadium weighs into what it is that we can do. And we've brought in the school district also, and we're going to see what we can work out. I have always been against the privatization of the bridges. I do not think that is a good idea. But, you know, as we discuss the infrastructure piece, obviously we're going to have a conversation about tolls and money and how we get to all of that. So that is coming. But one of the things that we've all talked about is that obviously there will be a carve out for seniors. So whatever we figure out, that's always on the list, at least for us. And we want it to be safe and secure. And we know that it's a big investment. So we're trying to fast track the Bear Cut one because, as you know, the original Bear Cut report didn't tell us anything. So we're kind of at a loss there, and we're trying to figure out what exactly, you know, can be done. And obviously the sargassum and all the other stuff that we deal with as we deal with the bridge. But I think right now, just kind of shoring up the use so that then we can move into, okay, who's using it, how often are they using it, who's coming in, who's coming out, you know, and what's the predictability behind that, then we can have a broader conversation about fixing the bridges. But it is a priority, and we're working on it. And obviously we're supporting you all in the stormwater work that you're doing. That's so important. And I've been very clear to our board that really Key Biscayne is leading the county in terms of the stormwater work and what you're doing with ACOM. So I'm really proud of the village and the work that you guys are doing. Like I always say, it's not easy to sell people on infrastructure. It's tough because they don't see it. But you know, in my district, we really are like at that tipping point. And we need to be having, you know, those conversations. We were very successful talking to the Army Corps of Engineers about other solutions. So for those of you who followed Back Bay, they wanted gray infrastructure, which is like not, it's a no, no, no. That's all I had to say was no. But we have gotten them to understand green infrastructure, and I actually did a mangrove map that shows kind of how the elimination of mangroves has eroded our shoreline. So now they're going to include that, and we're giving them other green infrastructure options, obviously the islands, you know, and different barriers that you can put up. A gray wall is a non-starter for us. But those are ongoing, you know, conversations that we're having with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we'll keep having those conversations and keeping everybody abreast of that. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to attend. Of course.
I am concerned about the animals. Are the animals, the ones that are there in Seaquarium, are you going to keep them there at the Seaquarium, or are you guys going to transfer them to SeaWorld? What's going to happen with the animals in the Miami Seaquarium here?
When the lease came to the Board of County Commissioners for the transfer, the lease had been signed in 1950 and didn't speak to the health of the animals. I negotiated with the new owners a clause that allows the county to consider the health of the animals, and that's why we've been able to sue them. So, but for this, because this all started with the USDA, right? And the USDA reports. There were some USDA reports that were negative. Recently, there have been some USDA reports that are positive. So I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, right? We've had issues. They've fixed some issues. We've gone back and forth. They have a lot of animals. They have over 500 animals. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of animals. They have lizards and parrots, and like they have marine animals and non-marine animals. They have fish. It's a lot of animals. We get a report, you know, every month, and we stay on top of the USDA on it. The issue with the USDA and that regulation is that it is only triggered by the performance. So there isn't protection for animals that are not performing. So that's like a weird thing, right? It's like a weird thing. Like you can own animals, but if they're not performing, then the government really doesn't get involved. Our interest is broader. What I added to the lease was the general well-being of all the animals, right? So obviously, you know, as to what happens to the animals, most of them belong to them. They don't belong to us. Some of them are leased. This is a fascinating thing, you know? Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah, some of them are leased, some of them are owned, so some of them belong to other people. You know, we have looked at different plans. Obviously, when we started the litigation, one of our concerns were, what happens if they just give us the keys and leave, right? Like, what do we do with the animals, right? Like, no, but that's a necessary, like, you gotta walk through all the possibilities, right? That didn't happen, but we did have a contingency plan. So we do have a contingency plan for every single animal, should something happen. But they are assets, you know, and they are not assets that belong to us. So if the animals are abandoned, we have a plan to step in and take care of them. But if the animals are moved, we cannot prevent them from being moved because we just own the leasehold. We don't own the animals. So that's like one of the weird things that we try to explain to folks, even when we were dealing with Lolita. Like we have a right because of the amendment that I placed to know about their well-being, but we don't have an ownership right in the animals. So that's kind of and we have, this entire thing has been about the safety of the animals. Really, it has been from its inception, and I will say, Daniela, we agree 100% on this. It really has been about the safety of the animals and their care of the animals. So that will continue, and it is part of the litigation, right?
Thank you for answering my question.
Sure, of course, yes.
I am still extremely concerned with the bear cut risk. What happens with all these disasters? Would we be, put back? Because these would be prioritized for what's happening with Ali.
Yeah.
All these bridges, different things that have happened, would we be put in the back burner?
No. So at the federal level, we're in a difficult spot because our bridges are relatively young compared to other bridges. So at the federal level, we haven't had a lot of traction because it's a very long list of bridges, and they're just like, what, your bridge is only what, like 50, 80 years old? That's nothing. We have a 300-year-old bridge, down by wherever. So, because that was our first, like when the federal government first came out with infrastructure money, we went running over there like, hey, we got these bridges. And obviously we have the Venetian, which is in very bad shape. The Venetian is in very bad shape. In terms of like the bridges, like the county knows that the Venetian is in very poor shape. And the Venetian has a historic component, which complicates like the situation even more. At the state level, our bridges are in an okay situation, but at the state level, it really is about matching funds. So the bridges that were gonna be fixed because of the hurricane trigger federal money, not necessarily like state money. So our thing is like the state money and the match, and are doing that infrastructure. Because we're at the bottom of the list on the federal side, unless we get an earmark from our Congress people, which we always ask for. Like we're always like, hey, can you earmark, because that's how you kind of jump the list. If they decide that that's an important project, then that's an important project. And the same thing is also true of our state partners. So if they decide to give us an allocation, they can always give us an allocation and we can move forward with that allocation. So the example that I'll give you is the Underline. So the Underline is a relatively new project. I'm very proud of it. Meg has done a wonderful job. But it jumped in front of a lot of other things because it had a lot of support, and it's fully funded, we're opening it. It's actually going to help Key Biscayne because it's going to take some of the cyclists, that are on the Rickenbacker now and give them another option. They're going to have another 10-mile option, very nearby. So, and that's the other thing that we have been working on trails, and other options for people throughout the county. So it's not just the Rickenbacker that you can bike on. And I think that that's very positive. But right now what we're trying to do is to fast track the study of Bear Cut as much as possible so then we can get to what needs to be done. It's very difficult. Everybody's like always, well, Bear Cut has problems, like why don't we just abandon it? I can't abandon it without a finding, right? So I have to have a finding. Like we all know that it's problematic, but we have to have a finding because, there's other bridges at the county that the county commission wants to invest in, right? So I gotta kind of show like, hey, this should be a priority for the following reasons. But we are trying to move that along. And one of the things that we're talking about is potentially splitting up transit and public works at the county on the department side to see if that kind of gets us moving a little bit faster. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out. So, but we will keep you posted, obviously. Yeah. Yes.
I was in Crane Park last week, in the park, and I actually went up to the lifeguard and said, what happened? Did the funding get cut for cleanup in here? The place looks like a disaster. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I used to love walking in there. Palm fronds all over the place, the garbage cans, and it was Tuesday. Garbage cans hadn't been emptied yet. I didn't see those guys riding around on their little carts picking up stuff. I mean, the walls are collapsing. It's really a mess.
So we have been complaining about the trash cleanup. Crandon has been getting a lot of use and by different types of people, right? So unfortunately, a lot of the Crandon users, are not being very responsible users, and that's one of the issues.
More the infrastructure.
Right. So yeah. So on the infrastructure part, I can tell you that we did renew the contract for the cleanup, and we also added a contract to kill the iguanas. For the iguana purge, yes. I'm gonna say that, I'm gonna say the word. I'm gonna say it for the iguana purge. Just because it was out of control, right? And by the way, the only place where I have more iguanas than on Crandon is Fairchild. They're destroying Fairchild. They're destroying Fairchild. I mean, they're invasive, they're destructive. I can't say enough. So we did allocate some resources, for the iguanas. They are part of the problem with the infrastructure. They're burrowing And so the walls, it's them. They're the ones that are kind of, I know it's a bizarre thing. Yeah, and they do a lot of damage. And there's certain parts of Crandon, I don't know if you've seen it, but like in the distance, you'll see green, and you'll be like, that's a weird place for plants. And then you get up close, and you're like, not plants, iguanas. A sea of iguanas. Yeah. There's a lot of them. So we're catching them, and and what we're trying to do is reduce the population before we go investing in fixing the infrastructure, because they're the ones that are doing.
Because their dunes have grown good, the
Yes.
dunes that were, those worked really well, but everything else around it was
Yes. Staff, we have a running joke. We don't understand the flip-flop thing at Crandon. So whenever you do a cleanup at Crandon, you find all these flip-flops, and we don't understand how these people get home without shoes. But it appears that we have a serious pata sucia problem in Key Biscayne, because everyone is leaving their flip-flops at Crandon. And when I tell you that it's like, I mean, we're not talking about like 2 flip-flops, 3, we're talking about 100 flip-flops. Like, it's not like a small thing, because you'd be like, oh, the commissioner mentioned there's lots of flip-flops. And you would think, oh, maybe there's 20. No, hundreds of flip-flops. I don't understand, like, how do they get home? So I don't know what's going on there. We have bizarre things like, yeah, someone's like, there's hundreds of people leaving Key Biscayne barefoot. I don't understand it. But yeah, so, but it is on the radar once, and interesting fact, FIFA came before us because FIFA is coming in 2026. And when they presented to the board, they were like, oh, they did their presentation, and I asked them about their environmental project because they have to do an environmental project. And they were like, yeah, we were thinking of doing what the Super Bowl did, like doing the pythons and maybe helping out with the pythons in the Everglades. And I was like, no. And they were like, no? What do you mean no? And I was like, nothing against the pythons. I leave that to the governor. He's doing such a great job. I need you to get rid of iguanas. And they were like, iguanas? And I was like, yes, I want an iguana perch. I would like you guys, there's the chicken of the trees, There's lots of uses for them. We can use them for bait. We can use them for nuggets. Like, I'm not being wasteful. But we need to get rid of some serious iguanas. So FIFA agreed. That'll be an interesting rollout. This is their first iguana rodeo. We're very excited. They are going to be taking care of some of our iguanas, because for those of you that have called trappers, it's really expensive. It's really expensive for the county, and it's really expensive for individuals, and they just, they procreate at such a high clip. It's amazing. I mean, every season they have like 40, 50. It's a lot. It's a lot of iguanas. And yeah, so when I talk about this with my colleagues, they don't get it because they don't have like a huge iguana problem. But my district, it's all over the county, but I mean, my district is like overrun by iguanas, like just overrun. I mean, it's like Jurassic Park. And I love Jurassic Park, right? I love Jurassic Park, but not so much iguanas. And so much so they're eating all of our native lizards. Like, when was the last time you saw a rock lizard? Like, I took this like to UF and to UM. I was like, can someone tell me what's happening to our native lizards? They're all being eaten by the iguanas. And the iguanas and the peacocks are becoming like scavengers. So they're like eating cat food and trash cans. Yeah. They're like scavengers. Yes. I will tell you this, because I've learned a lot about them. They don't like citrus. So if you plant oranges and lemons, they don't like citrus. So interesting fact about iguanas, they don't see you coming, they smell you coming. Yeah. Because I've been out with the hunters, it's tons of fun. But yeah, they're very sensitive to smell, and obviously they love mangoes and avocados.
And they always eat my mangoes.
Yeah. They love mangoes and avocados, but they hate citrus. So if you plant citrus trees, they go away, and obviously they don't like dogs. They don't like dogs. So if you get a dog, you probably will not have an iguana problem. If you get a dog, and if you do both, you're probably good. So yeah, but that's one of the main issues at Crandon. So we're tackling that, and then moving on, and we are working with the village on the dunes and some other stuff over there. So, all right. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, no, the iguana thing. It's fun. Yeah. All right. Cool. No, my
One
pleasure.
other thing, the commissioner has been very, very supportive of our e-bike ban.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention that.
Yes.
And again, thank you for coming out and talking. Will you be having lunch with us?
No, I got to run off, but I hope you enjoy your lunch. But thank you. Thank you. And you have all of my support, really. Anything that you all need. Thank you.
A
Thank
big
you so
hand
much.
of applause for the commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the information.
Oh, my pleasure. Enjoy your lunch.